He was in the US.
So, Gabby and Shannon, thank you for coming on to today's podcast.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's great to have you actually both behind one screen.
Yeah.
For some reason, I knew that you guys were in Madrid together, but I was like, oh, it'd be really cool to have like 3 screens and do this whole like broadcast, and it's not at all. But oh well, it's still great.
Yeah.
So you've both been on the podcast before. Shannon, I think this is your 3rd time. Gabby, this is your 2nd time, I believe, rightly. So, but if people haven't heard of you before, they haven't listened back, could you just give us a quick intro of who you are, what it is you do now?
So I am Dr. Gabrielle Fundaro. I have my background in the gut microbiome and also the science of teaching motivation in individuals so that they engage in the process of learning. Got some background noise because Shannon and I are digital nomads, and we're in Madrid right now, and they're doing some construction. After a 4-year stint in academia, I transitioned to coaching full-time, and I coach for Renaissance Periodization, and I also own my own business, Vitamin PhD Nutrition. So I do coaching and consulting for behavior change and GI-specific concerns.
Cool. I'm Shannon. So my background's actually in law, but Johnny and I are MNU buddies. And I'm a coach for Flex Success, which is a team of coaches kind of based in Australia, but we kind of work all over as well with a bunch of people. And again, all similar things like behavior change and addressing mostly eating behaviors, do some training as well. But we like to focus on facilitating like adaptive styles of eating. So we think that's something that's really important and often kind of overlooked.
And it's great that you guys have positioned together with your both focusing on that aspect of behavior change in particular. And you're both sort of co-authoring the Bridging the Gap series at the minute. So what made you guys decide to bring that on as a project, I guess?
I can't remember how I
invited you. When we're talking about behavior change, we often talk about it pretty broadly. And I think eating behaviors have some specific kind of things that we need to think about when we're addressing someone's eating behaviors. And a lot of the time we see people just sticking to one method to try and induce a healthier behavior change. And the Bridging the Gap series is kind of taking a step back, looking at the changes that we're trying to, this is what our clients come to us for. They want to change their body composition. They have these specific goals, but the weight neutral approaches also raise some important considerations. And there's something I believe that we can take away from these approaches, and it's important to be aware of them. So the Bridging the Gap series was designed, specifically to do that, to bridge that gap between facilitating, as you say, adaptive styles of eating and getting results for our clients, but doing it in a way that's not going to cause any psychological harm, which is something that does happen.
Exactly. I was initially inspired to start writing about this because I was watching debates about intuitive eating and about weight neutral approaches between individuals that didn't really understand what they were debating. It was for like 2 people about a person. You can't have a productive conversation. So, we really need to bring to light the details there, and so that people can be informed. And if you want to debate with an informed opinion, absolutely, by all means, do so. Might be very different. And so part of what I thought it was just going to be maybe a blog post. And then I was like, this is really important. And like the only other person that I know of who's as like fired up about it as I am, yes, is Shannon. And so I talked to her about it and I said, we need to get this out there. And I want write a whole article series. And so it started with the initial article talking about the link between intuitive eating and autoregulation, which is interoceptive or receptive sensitivity, correctly identify what sensation we are feeling within our current physiology. So am I hungry? Do I have to urinate? Am I feeling gassy? Is something in me achy? And how we can translate that into auto-regulation. So auto-regulation is a way of modifying one's training sort of short-term in response to their self-determined readiness for training that day. So you might assess your current level of recovery as kind of shit. And so you do a little bit less than what you had planned to do. And it's due to that ability of interoceptive awareness. And it also allows us to subjectively measure things like soreness or mind-muscle connection or pump. So we do this all the time in training, and it's sort of now part of just kind of status quo. I mean, it's a normal thing to do, even though initially when auto-regulation was being developed and emerging, people kind of poo-pooed it, similarly to the way that they poo-poo the idea of intuitive eating, because they don't think that people have the capability of determining, biological hunger and eating just an adequate amount and responding and having an adaptive response, like Shannon said. So then instead of having a reaction to a food environment that's sort of uncontrolled, that they can have a logical, measured response, that they have decided to do something in that food environment.
Yeah, and I think it's an interesting analogy because, as you say, autoregulation is it's now getting, a more accepted approach, whereas we still do have a lot of misconceptions around intuitive eating. And I think it's part of it is because everybody eats, so everyone has an opinion, and everyone thinks they know what intuitive eating means, and they're broadcasting these opinions without even having read the book or having read the literature. And that to me just does not make any sense. Like, Jenny, if you asked me what do you think of this new training method, and I just heard the name but I didn't know anything about it, I didn't know what the exercises were, what the rep scheme was, what the progressions were, and I wouldn't be able to give an opinion on it. I don't know why people talk about an intuitive eating approach without having read any of the information out there.
And like the fact that there is a book. I mean, I understand if you are, hey, what book can I read about this? And I'm like, oh, there's a book called Intuitive Eating. But if you're like, I don't want to read this book, I just want to have my opinions. That's I think what really honestly pisses us both off. It's like, I didn't want to just convince, I don't go out to convince people of anything. I'm just like, all I want, the educator in me is so upset at people just being misinformed. That's the crux of it, just getting the information out there.
I was thinking about why do I care that? Because I'm not married to any one approach, so I don't have any special, intuitive eating doesn't mean anything to me for the sake of it. Same as I use a number of approaches to eating with my clients depending on what they need at the time. And the reason that I kind of get frustrated that we're going around in circles with these conversations is because, again, it's not that difficult to understand, and we're not clear on what it really is. And I think I wrote a blog post on intuitive eating back in July, last year. And I feel like now that it's something that keeps coming up, and I'm getting bored of the conversation too. It's not I don't want to be pigeonholed as someone who only talks about intuitive eating, but it's well, we're still having the same conversation because nobody knows what it is still.
I mean, you guys were just running the show for a minute there. It was a really great to hear, obviously, your thoughts on it all. And as you said, I think that's the issue with the fitness industry in general, is this idea of people having opinions on things they haven't really read or they have no clue in understanding. It's why we have such confusion in the first place between low carb fanatics and low fat fanatics and everything like that. It's just a bunch of people that have a bias that haven't actually read the other opinion, but they know what theirs is, and so that they're going to shove it down your throat.
Yeah, and again, another reason that is frustrating is because I would really love to have productive conversations about this. Like, I would like to know what the limitations are. There's not a lot of research in intuitive eating in athletes. Like, that's something that we could talk about. But instead, the conversation comes back to questions like, should athletes be intuitive eating? I'm like, well, that's kind of a pointless conversation because it's not addressing the point of intuitive eating. Like, this question doesn't actually make sense in the context of what the framework actually is for. So why are we having this conversation when we're not talking about like practical applications? Like, how do we go about encouraging our clients to give themselves unconditional permission to eat? Because I think that is something that people do struggle with. Like, that could potentially be a limitation. So how can we overcome that? We can't have discussions about this until we're on the same page.
Because the conversation continuously comes back to, well, you know, the misconception, you can't do intuitive eating unless you have body weight with intuitive eating, or can you maintain peak performance with intuitive eating? Well, that's like asking, are you going to be able to really increase your squat max through a rehabilitation exercise? Like, we have to look at intuitive eating as rehabilitative, and then other structured forms of eating as performance-based. But just like if an athlete has an injury, we progress them through rehabilitation exercises. It's the same thing with eating. And it's not about, when you're in a rehabilitative phase, it's not about like, well, what's your squat max right now? Well, how much can you bench right now? You know, like you don't tell your client like, oh, we're going to rehabilitate you, but first we need to make sure that like your squat form is on point. Well, no, they're injured. Their squat form is regulated in some way. And that's what we're trying to work on. So we're trying to we're trying to, aim that conversation in a direction that can be more productive and can be beneficial for the industry. But we're still kind of stuck in this this pothole of, but intuitive eating isn't for weight management. Well, no, and no one said it was to begin with. You know, and like really, individuals associated with intuitive eating or HAES don't say that like weight loss is not allowed. They just say, we don't care. Your weight might go down, it might go up, it might stay the same. That's not what it's about. It's just like when you're in a rehabilitation phase, your maxes are probably going to change. It's not about that. We're just trying to get you to a place of functionality.
Yeah, some great analogy already in the you guys, the first drawing way back to that analogy of comparing intuitive eating more to like auto-regulation of training. It's like similar frameworks. And as you said, because it's new, it's not that new, but it's kind of coming around again, which trends in the fitness industry inevitably do. We can go down that rabbit hole, but let's not for the moment. So that's a really nice analogy, because I think that helps people understand it, that kind of auto-regulation of their eating habits, like they would auto-regulate their training habits. And then that analogy of comparing it to rehabilitation, I think is really nice, because it's this idea of, as you said, if you're injured in training, you would focus on some rehabilitation before then going back to a program. So if your relationship with food is dog shit, then let's rehab it and let's find that joy again. And then from there, once you've got a better relationship with food, we can focus on performance, or we can focus on weight loss, and it's using the correct framework at the correct time for that individual, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and that's the benefit of acknowledging that there's application for all of these approaches, rather than just saying this one will work.
Doesn't make sense.
Yes.
What does this person need? So is more approach change, specifically in the concept of one approach, and you're probably going to need some sort of structure. Like, it's, I think, knowing when to use something like intuitive is because the reason that intuitive eating is, or what it's designed for is, as we say, is to rehab someone's relationship with food, to get them to a healthier place. And if the people who are in need of this approach, or who would benefit from this approach, are likely displaying covert behaviors that you can't see. And if they're not aware that this approach is something that is appropriate for them, they're not going to, suggest it themselves. If they think that they need to track macros, or that they need to always prioritize a training goal or a body composition goal, then they're just going to keep on digging themselves into the hole that they're currently in. And it's our job to be able to identify those behaviors in someone, which is difficult because, as I said, they are covert, and we're mostly working online with these people as well. So we need to be able to have open discussions about these and get kind of the awareness out there so that we can use these interventions when they are appropriate.
Yeah. And a lot of these behaviors too are sort of normalized, like they occur on a spectrum. So you get these very like absolutist memes, like disordered eating, it's not disordered eating just because you're weighing your food. Well, that's a false dichotomy. Like you can't say, oh, it's, just weighing your food isn't disordered. Well, maybe not, but it could be. So we have to be able to recognize that we're talking in terms of a behavior within a context of other behaviors and within a context of an individual. And it can become apparent through their verbiage in emails or, over the phone or in whatever consult you have, they may be exhibiting some thought patterns or some behavior patterns that are on the more disordered end of the spectrum. And that it's not just a black and white, diagnosable eating disorder or not, that disordered eating habits occur on a spectrum. And so we have to be very sensitive to that and not, sort of we get this sort of reactionary thing going where it's like, oh, well, I don't want to be a part of the problem. Like, this, we can't say this is disordered because I do this too. It doesn't feel disordered in me. And, try to react less with emotion and just be more aware and cognizant of the risks that come with dieting behavior.
I don't think saying, tracking your macros causes eating disorders is helpful, but I also don't think saying that you can track or tracking isn't disordered, that's not helpful either. Like they're both the same thing, just on either end of the scale. So just saying something like some people can track and it will be fine and some people can't, and it's also fine, and here's how to recognize what kind of person but you can't really say that on like an Instagram post. So I would rather just not say it, or err on the side of caution, because if someone reads like tracking your macros may cause an eating disorder, if there's someone who's fine with tracking macros, they're not going to stop just because they've read that. They're going to think, well, I'm okay, so clearly this doesn't apply to me. Whereas someone who is, displaying some kind of pathological thought patterns and behaviors, sees something like tracking your macros doesn't cause an eating disorder, they're going to think, there's something wrong with me. Maybe I'm just doing it wrong. I should just keep trying. And that's not going to help anyone. Yeah,
exactly.
I mean, we're all in the fitness industry here, so we know that not only do the people love black and white terms, but the fitness industry in itself is very good at delivering black and white terms, because people want the answer and they want it right now, or they want it yesterday, really. And what we're talking about here is this idea of living in the grey. And I know, Shannon, you've posted about this before as well. It's living in that grey of like, it doesn't have to be, but it could. And you made a great point in terms of their personality type and their history of dieting and everything else. And it's like all of those things will play in to what that person needs at that time. And that's going to require some great self-awareness from the person's point of view. But if they're working with a coach, it's going to need someone who's very good at establishing a relationship with that person, understanding what their personality drivers are, and then understanding their back history and how that's led them into now and what they need now.
Not only is like the grey zone difficult to talk about in an Instagram post and difficult to explain all the nuance, but people love to be in a tribe, tribalism is rife, and you're either in the macro tracking camp or you're in the intuitive eating camp, or you're the macro coach or the intuitive eating coach, and I wouldn't want to be known as any of those things. I would just want to be a coach who facilitates adaptive behavior in someone using whatever approach is appropriate at the time. So if we're not having productive conversations, then we're not going to know how to, you know, be able to apply the appropriate approach. And I think trying to refrain from any form of tribalism, whether it's on the intuitive side or whether it's on the macro tracking side, I think that's probably the most productive place to be in.
I think people even sort of apply your tribe or try to. I was told when I was having some conversations about this article before it was published, part 1, and I was in the planning stages, I was told, be careful about who you're defending. And I thought, is it really coming across that I'm defending anyone? I'm not. I don't care what people decide to do. I just want them to be informed, because that's how you can truly be empowered. And I think we now are getting, you know, we can be more effective coaches. We can be more empowered to evoke change in our clients, because we're not dogmatic about any one approach. It's literally just, oh my gosh, I have a whole library of approaches that have all this context and nuance and little tools and things that I can pull from a variety of areas. Why wouldn't you want all the ways in which this can't work? Okay, well, don't apply it in those situations. Just learn about it and be informed and be equipped to know when it is appropriate to be applied.
I think the sort of backlash has been quite interesting, because to me, if something sounds like it goes against my beliefs, then just ignoring it, I think that's a chance to look closer. So I'm like, okay, what's this? It sounds a bit weird, or this isn't what I've considered in the past. Maybe I should check it out, because maybe I'm missing something. And then reading something like the book with an open mind and taking, you know, points from it for what it's worth. I think that's kind of the way to build your knowledge base, or to get a, you know, more robust understanding, is to lean into that kind of ambivalence feeling where you're like, I'm not really sure about this approach. Sounds weird to me. That's how you kind of open up your mind a little bit more.
Yeah, you should be able to argue for the opposing viewpoint, because then at least, even if you still want to adhere to your opinion, you can predict what the person across from you might be saying, and at least, you know, reach a point of mutual understanding and then grow from that. But to only be able to argue for your side of the argument, you are absolutely
That's not how you expand knowledge, is it?
Yeah, exactly.
No, I mean, it comes back to that idea of not just thinking critically, but also just being aware of the deeper levels, as you said, of understanding why they do believe that, or why they have that opinion. And there's always principles underneath methods, aren't there? So it's like, once you understand the principles, then you'll understand why the methods are used in what situation. But it's, as you said earlier, this idea of anything new kind of gets people back up if they don't understand it, and they're like, "Oh, this is different. It's scary. I don't understand it. It's scary. So I'm not going to agree with it. It doesn't sound like what I've done in the past." And people get very defensive about this kind of thing because of their tribes, because of their biases, and because of what might have worked for them and many of their clients. And for the clients then it didn't work for, they were just like, well, it just didn't work for them, or they didn't try hard enough, or whatever, as opposed to pursuing a different method. So it's, as you said, Gabby, having this, if you're a coach listening to this, having your toolbox full with different approaches and methods is just a good thing to have.
Yeah. And you mentioned biases, and the thing is, like, we all have biases. And for example, when I first heard about the Hayes approach, I was a bit unsure. I was like, we just, you know, mollycoddling people and making them feel like it's acceptable to be the way they are. And then I read more about it, and I'm like, okay, that's not actually what the approach is about at all. And then the more that you go, the more you can understand. I'm like, I can see now the weight stigma is such a huge problem. So encouraging people to engage in healthier behaviors, no matter where they are, actually makes a lot of sense. And knowing about that has kind of had applications in the way that I coach people. So recently I had a conversation with a client who felt like she was too far gone. That was what she was saying on our call. And having read about Hayes, and I can see how that she may feel like that, and that understanding allows me to be more empathetic because I can see what someone is dealing with. And we spoke about, I've also been looking at ACT, which is acceptance and commitment therapy, and knowing the difference between goals and values, and having a broad understanding. I can draw from different approaches. So I spoke to her about the concept of having goals versus values, and a goal is like an objective, like I've got to lose weight, whereas values, you can value living or treat. And that also ties into the intuitive eating approach as well, because that's one of the principles of intuitive eating, is having respect for your body. And I said to her that you can live according to this value right now. Like, it's not a destination. You can just choose to do that with the decisions that you're making day to day. It's not about being too far gone, because there's nothing stopping you from living according to your value of respecting your body, which may include making nutritious food choices and moving, whatever that kind of form of movement looks like, anything that you enjoy. And that's something that she could implement straight away, and that draws from ACT, that ties in with intuitive eating, and it also encompasses Hayes principles. So that's I can see how it all comes together from having the broader understanding of what someone else may be going through, rather than just saying, you just don't have enough willpower.
And that's the thing. Yeah, that is what, when we have this toolbox and we can practice greater understanding and empathy, which is so key, we are able to better empower the clients too. Yep. Quite often you see coaches that have, a couple tools in their toolbox. I'm only a macros coach. This person doesn't count macros. What do they say? This is a non-compliant client. They just won't adhere. You just have to, how bad do you want it? You just don't want it bad enough. You need more motivation. You need more self-control. And the clients internalize that. And then they say, oh, well, that's the problem, is that I don't have enough willpower. I don't have enough self-control. I just can't control myself. And it's almost that, I think a coach who isn't well equipped can really put their clients in a place of learned helplessness, where it seems to the client that nothing has worked so far because their everything is only, as myopic as what the coach has told them to do. And it's really unfortunate, because that person now is losing out on the chance to build more self-efficacy. They haven't had the chance to challenge themselves with new opportunities and prove that they are capable. It's just capable of something else. They just need a different set of tools. So if we really are going out to help people, which I hope is what most people want to do, most coaches want to do that, then it behooves us to be able to use a variety of approaches with our clients.
And as you said, that is what we see, coaches pathologizing ambivalence, which is a normal part of human condition, as non-compliance. Like a good example is, I've run out of coffee beans. I really want a coffee right now, but it's also raining outside. I don't really want to go outside, but I want a coffee. Like, that's normal to feel ambivalent. Wanting like two things at once, wanting a coffee, but also wanting to stay inside. And like you said, we do see coaches pathologizing that. Whereas if you have a broader toolbox, you can help someone. And I think that's something that I learned when I learned more about the intuitive eating approach. It's like, why do we use macros all the time? Like, why is that our instinctive response? If someone comes to us and they want to change their eating habits, macros straight away. And it makes sense, because it's easy for us as a coach. We can quantify that. We can put it in a nice little spreadsheet and view it online, and we forget to ask the questions about someone's eating behaviors. Like, do they actually have a healthy pattern of eating? Like, are they eating, do they feel in control of their next level conditioning or goals or whatever? Why is that always our go-to? And what we find is that, we've got these fitness professionals who do work with more athletic populations. Using that means we're still using the same approach, and it's like, well, is this really necessary for someone? Am I just doing it because it's easier for me? I know how to teach it. It's reduced cognitive load for me to think about, and it's easier to monitor and track. Or are we doing it because it's appropriate? Like, what do we really need to work on first? And how else can we model behaviors? And what else should we be looking out for? And I think the intuitive approach kind of food is quite important, because how are you going to manage your nutrition if you're coming from a place of fear and restriction? It's going to make it very difficult. And I think that's one of the principles of intuitive eating, like why they don't prioritize nutrition at the start of it. Because if you're trying to prioritize nutrition, then it's very difficult to allow yourself things like unconditional permission to eat, because you're scared of what may happen if you do that.
Yeah. It was great points, because you talked about coaches not only working with athletic populations, then bringing the same methods across, but also that idea of the coach who's taught via science, as we are. It's very easy for us to be like, quantifiably, this is what this person needs if this is their goal. And I think and definitely how I felt as a coach in the past, you feel like you obviously have the obligation to help the client achieve the result they've come to you to get. And so in your head, you're thinking, well, at least if I'm aware of this, I know that if all things being equal in X amount of time, they should achieve said result. And if they were to go by this method and that matches their personality and things like that, they're going to find it easier. They're going to be happy. I'm going to be happy. Job's a good one type thing. But it's one, knowing if the personality of the client matches that approach before you use it. Two, what their history is before you use it. And then three, pairing up other things with it as well, in terms of not just doing that, but focusing on the habits and the behaviors. I guess what we need now as coaches, and we can talk more about how this applies to regular people next, but what we need as coaches is this idea of having rather than a finite mindset of helping the client achieve X goal they've come towards, is having almost an infinite mindset of how do I set up this client to be healthy for life? And that might require a slightly different route at first than the one they've come to me for. So although they said they want weight loss, they've got a really shit relationship with food. We kind of need to take care of that first, and to set up this client for life to live a happy, healthy life, pass it on to their kids and everyone around them. We need this framework first.
Yeah, and I think it's having the integrity as a coach to know how to have those difficult conversations with clients. Because I can imagine if someone's coming to you wanting to change and you're turning around and saying, actually, I don't think this is a great idea for you right now. Likelihood is you may get clients going, all right, then see ya. I'm going to go for the next coach that will get me to my goals. So how do we deal with situations like that? These are the kind of conversations that I would like to be having, really. How to get that point across to clients that actually your health is really important, and even if we did go down that route, it's likely to be unsuccessful anyway. How do we convince people of that?
And I think that's one of the things too with Haze is people get confused about their messaging about dieting, that there's a message about diets not working, and they don't mean that an energy deficit does not induce weight loss. That's scientific principle.
The fad diet.
What they're getting at is that it's exactly these short-term diets, and part of the reason that people do that, and part of the reason that it's so challenging to have those conversations, is because this ingrained diet culture that and I see it much more in women. Not that it doesn't affect men, though. It certainly does. It just manifests a little bit differently. This idea of having to be smaller, of having, not being able to accept my body until it looks a way that is stereotypically fitness attractive. Once everyone else accepts my body, then I can accept my body, and then I can work on my relationship with food. So removing the stigma of weight maintenance or weight gain, especially. That is one that people are, I think, just viscerally afraid of weight gain as a result of working on their and that not our main concern right now.
Yeah, unfortunately, I lost a back end of a lot of that, which I'm sure is a real gem. you just froze on me, unfortunately, and I just lost the sort of back end of it. I don't know if you just mind repeating it.
What
Oh,
point did it cut out?
did you get the part? Well, I was talking about
the fear of
the
weight gain.
stigma attached to. Yes, yes, exactly. So that's a conversation that we really need to have, because what I mentioned that might have cut out was that I've had discussions, you know, on podcasts and things like that. And people's main concern was, well, what happens if a person gains weight?
Yeah.
You know, or what if they eat more than they need to? That may be one of the outcomes, but that would be sort of that's not like the main focus. You know, what we want to do is, like you said, set that person up for life so that they can improve their relationship with food for life. And we need to remove the stigma associated with the weight gain that might occur with that. There's nothing wrong. There's nothing intrinsically wrong or morally wrong with weight gain. And, you know, I think once we can normalize that, we may be able to have more productive conversations and better help our clients. But it's just that fear that really, I think, holds them back.
Yeah, and it's having that conversation, as you said, Shannon, with the client, and what you said there, Gabby. It's like the phases of this is we need to be putting this first, rather than like putting the cart before the horse. And you said, you know, okay, well, I want to get to this size first, and then when I've got to there, then I'll focus on my relationship with food. And it's like, well, actually, and I know this because this is definitely my back history of going into sort of really hard approaches, not necessarily fad diets, but like all or nothing approaches, and then rebounding afterwards, is this idea of you can do that all you want, and that'll just be an endless cycle. This definitely needs to come first. And the thing, what you said, Shannon, is like, maybe as a coach, we have to accept that they then go elsewhere. But I think if more coaches like us talk about this necessity first, then the people who are in the stage of still trying to do these all or nothing approaches will still do them. And then when they've done that enough, they will find you because you've been talking directly to them. It's that golden rule of marketing. And I know I'm kind of talking to the coaches that might listen to this, but it's that idea of, you know, your niche becomes almost this person in this stage, not necessarily a demographic. Like, I work with, you know, this person between these ages who wants to achieve this. It's a case of, your demographic is the person who's at this stage of their life where they're ready for this change and they're ready for this framework to be bestowed upon them. And then, better yet, once they have those tools, they have the guidance of a coach who can then say, great, now that you're in this lovely place, we now have a framework that we can use to help you achieve your goal. And that can look like anything you want it to be. Let's explore that together. And it's like happy days.
Well, and you can also help to evoke that in your client. So part of Shannon and I are doing a certification now on motivational interviewing, and this was something that I had learned about when I was still a professor and I was doing advising, and I wanted to really help my students, because you want to talk about an ambivalent group of people. It's 18-year-olds who don't know what major they want to pick, you know, I mean, and they're like, I have to decide for the rest of my life. I don't know what I want to do when I grow up. And so I learned about appreciative advising, which is really sort of the academic version of motivational interviewing, which is a collaborative, client-centered approach to evoke behavior change and readiness for change in people who are ambivalent. And so I quite often actually start off with clients who want to simultaneously fix their relationship with food and lose weight. And I don't necessarily, you know, I try to be a good Sherpa and say this motivational interviewing, and through asking powerful questions and having productive conversations that allow a person to process their thoughts and feelings, they quite often will progress on their own. So they go from a place of, you know, what we would call pre-contemplation. So they like really don't want to necessarily start out with intuitive eating. They don't want to give up their goal of weight loss, and eventually get to a place of, you know, contemplation. They're like, I actually think it might be better for me to stop tracking. And then they enter finally that preparation stage where they're, you know, okay, I think this weekend I'm not gonna track anything. And then action, actively actively refraining. So it thinks it's sort of strange to think of not doing a behavior, but that's another form of habit, is to sort of refrain from doing something. And then over time, they just are, they have this liberation of, okay, I don't have to track everything, you know, but it's just that they have to decide that it's the right thing for them to do in that moment. So we do take difficult conversations to have and more soft skills to develop that go far beyond, here's your macros, and, you know, like here's your macros, here's the trajectory, and weigh in a couple times a week.
Good luck.
Yeah, we've all had clients who we've used the macro approach and it's worked wonderfully. They've got great results. And then you've had clients who you've used the macro tracker and then it makes you wonder, well, why does this approach work for one person and it doesn't work for the other? And oftentimes it's because the person who does well with this approach is in control of their food choices, and they're starting at a great place. And then the person that doesn't do so well, like maybe they experience like emotional eating or something like that, and it's those behaviors that need to be addressed because they're the biggest bottleneck in the client's progress. And having, like we say, a toolbox of different approaches is really what's going to fast track someone's progress. And what I would love to help someone engage in healthier behaviors for like the sake of the enjoyment and being healthy and finding satisfaction in those things, in a way that's also like it's not difficult for them to get on board with. Like, what's the best way that we can fast track this approach? Because we know that working on these behaviors is something that's going to be really important. And ultimately, further down the line, it's going to be the overall quickest way in the grand scheme of things, but it may take longer from the client's perspective because we're not immediately prioritizing weight loss goals. Like, how are we going to help someone come to that realization, people aware that this is something that is, you know, viable? Like when we first started talking about maintenance phases and the importance of maintenance, that was like mind-blowing because what do you mean that I don't have to focus on either cutting or bulking or, you know, or trying to improve my performance or something? Like there's value in just like living my life for a little bit. And then when you start talking about that more, people are like, oh yeah, like I'm on my maintenance phase now. And I'm like, cool. Like it's good that people actually, you know, think it's a thing and it's something that's valuable. So I think, again, by, you know, doing things like comparing intuitive eating to a fad diet or something like that, then we're devaluing the approach and making it less accessible to the people that need it.
Yeah, because it's not a fad diet at all. It's a framework of, it's a system and a framework.
Yeah, and I'm glad that you raised that point as well, because that's another misconception. It's more about, like you say, a framework of self-care. And it's about your relationship with your food, but also your relationship with yourself. And something that's becoming more and more evident is that motivation for change is important. Like someone's reason, someone's intention behind change is actually relevant. And this focus to get your carbohydrates in, that we forget to address the why behind those behaviors. And if we work on that, sometimes it leads to the what anyway, you know? Like if someone will know once you've taught them like what a source of protein is, it doesn't take long to be able to identify those food. It doesn't necessarily make it easier to make that choice.
Yes, yeah. And we talk a lot about increasing motivation, like we just need more of it. And really what we need to be doing is shifting it. So we're moving. Source. Yes, exactly. Yeah. So when we help a person identify their values, we can then align their goals and their values and their intrinsic motivation. I want to be a good role model. I want to be a good parent, or I'm this, you know, X kind of athlete, and I'm making these choices because they're aligned with my values as an individual. That doesn't actually require quite as much effort as something that is extrinsically motivated. So where we're doing something to gain a reward or does not have great longevity. And it's also kind of selectively effective for just certain tasks. But if we try to apply extrinsic motivation to tasks that require some sort of cognitive function, it actually reduces success. So like when you're putting a person in a challenging food environment and you're saying, okay, it's time to do some processing now and some mindfulness, think about why you want to eat, and then you're like, and here's your only do this, I'm going to mean to you tomorrow on your check-in, things are all external. Like we need to be having those conversations with them and like talk about, I don't know why, this is another thing. A lot of coaches don't want to talk about like feelings and the actual person. They're like, no, you just need to do this. Like this is what you need to do. You know what you need to do. Just do it. Like that's kind of ridiculous. You're
not working with energy concentration.
Yes.
You're working with a person.
Yeah.
And emotions are part of everyone's life. So like you said, I don't know why we don't address them, especially when emotions are really tied up with our eating behaviors.
Well, exactly.
How are you going to...
Sorry. There was a bit of a lag there.
That's okay. We had a delay.
There was a bit of a lag there. It's some really great points you both make. And the intrinsic motivations are really cool for one. And I like Gabby how you talked about the pairing someone's like larger values than with their intrinsic motivation of what they do, because I think that's definitely a missed trick, not a trick, but a missed thing in general from people, not just coaches, but people in themselves. And James Clear talks about that in Atomic Habits, where he says, the 3 circles of like, you've got the what on the outside and the how in the middle. And then, the middle is the middle circle. And then the very inner circle is the identity. Yeah. So the identity of the human is what then is portrayed through the daily actions, and then that is what's going to achieve the outcome. So it's going a layer deeper than the process. Like most coaches now are like, oh, let's talk about the process then. Like, how are you going to achieve that? But it's deeper than that. It's like, well, why are you doing this in the first place? And if this is really your greater goal or purpose or mission within this life, how can we then tie in your eating habits into that so that they are congruent and you don't feel this sense of guilt, you don't feel this sense of misalignment almost with how you're eating versus what you're trying to achieve in life, not just in the next 12 weeks.
Exactly. I think values are so much more powerful than motivation. Because again, specifically in the context of eating behaviors, we have many motivations to eat, and these may change from meal to meal. My motivation to eat may be an external cue that, the sight of food, oh, now I want to eat food. Or it may be for the nutrition, like of some kind of performance aspect. I want my food to give me this fuel specifically for this thing. Or I'm eating just for the hedonic pleasure of it. And if you've got the value, so for example, perhaps your value is to be a great partner in your relationship, like a husband or a wife or whatever. And maybe your partner comes home and they've got, some brownie or a cake or like some kind of gift for you to enjoy. And you've got this goal of reaching a certain body weight by the end of the week. And now you're in like some kind of conflict about, do I eat this thing because I want to be a good partner, but I've got this goal. And if you're living according to your values, and to you that means being a good partner and enjoying this, whatever this thing is, this food item is, with your partner, you're going to feel fine about it overall. You're gonna be like, well, okay, that might, what's more important to me at the end of the day is being a great partner, and I don't want to let this person down. Obviously, some people may argue you don't have to eat the thing, and I understand that, but just for the example, you just want to make this person happy, and you eat the thing, and you go about your day because you're fine, because you know what your values are and what's important to you. Whereas if you're goal focused, motivation focused, and you eat the food anyway, then you're just going to feel shit about yourself because you're not going to reach this goal that you determined was important to you.
Which is just
Goals
abstract.
and motivations change, but values are more deeply entrenched in someone. And if you're more attuned to your values and you can live according to those, it can make making these choices easier for you.
Yes.
You're not having some internal conflict about whether to eat the damn food, because you're just like, at the end of the day, I know what's important to me. And you can regulate yourself, like over time anyway. It becomes easier to do that because you haven't got these emotions that you're battling. Guilt, which is something that's so common, is feeling guilty about your food choices.
And I think that's a lot of it too, is that in that example, that person has made a choice. So they've done some level of sort of a cost benefit analysis.
Like a cognitive evaluation.
Yes, they have a cognitive evaluation. They know that, they've appraised what that brownie is going to do, for them, for their partner, for their goals, and they've been able to make a choice in that situation. And you also brought up the great point of self-regulation. And I think this is where people get really frightened. And this is a conversation that I've had with so many clients when we talk about unconditional permission to eat. They say, if I give myself unconditional permission to eat, I won't be able to stop. And it's one of the primary, I think, concerns that people have. And one point that has been brought up in every conversation that I've had, that humans are sort of intrinsically flawed at determining when they've had enough to eat, especially when we're talking about hyperpalatable foods. And to that I say that is true, that especially individuals with disordered eating, and that is individuals with binge eating disorder or with anorexia nervosa, they have attenuated sensitivity. That means that the sensitivity to having had enough to eat may be dampened initially. But intuitive eating is actually associated, if we're talking about an intervention and just longitudinal predictions, is actually better interoceptive awareness. That means people are better able to determine their satiety level. So I've had enough to eat, I don't need to eat anymore. And it's not associated with increased quote unquote junk food intake or with elevations in BMI. So we actually have data that's counter to those misconceptions. And on top of that, quite often individuals are using food to meet non-food needs. So they have an emotional need or a mental need. They're bored, they're lonely, and they're not eating food in a mindful way. And so they're not making choices necessarily in that moment to eat that food. They're having a reaction to a situation.
Such an impulse.
Exactly. Yes. It's more impulsive eating. It's reactionary. And not to say that that's something bad or something to be ashamed of. It's just something to recognize, because that's an opportunity for change, and a place where we can find other ways to better meet our needs. And if we are eating really hyperpalatable food in a way that's sort of mindless or impulsive, very rapid, and we're not paying attention to our hunger and fullness signals, changing that is part of the intuitive eating journey, so that when we are in a tempting food environment, our partner brings us home brownies, we can look at that as, wow, this person really loves me and they want to bring me a food that I enjoy, and I'm going to eat just as much of this as I feel good about. It might be a whole brownie, it might be a couple of bites. I'm going to do it mindfully so I can really enjoy it, and then I'm going to be like, oh, I'm not hungry anymore. I'm just going to go about my day, and free from the guilt and the shame and the anxiety that usually will then lead to a subsequent episode of impulsive or reactionary eating. I mean, that's really what we're trying to facilitate for people, and that is how you can live, I think, overall, just a more fulfilling and relaxed life. Like, I have seen so many people who think my partner or my family is trying to sabotage me, and what an unfortunate perspective to have. Not to say that it might not be true, but I think it's so much nicer if we can exist with the assumption that, like, this person is trying their best, and maybe that the intentions are good. We can have a conversation. I appreciate it if you treated me with something different. I would love to have flowers instead of brownie.
Yeah, I've actually
know?
had kind of perspective, like you do have a choice.
Yeah.
And, you know, I just used that example about how you may want to live according to your values and eat the brownie. But at the end of the day, the point is that you have a choice.
Mhm.
And you mentioned mindfulness, and that's a skill set within the framework of intuitive eating.
Yeah.
And what mindfulness does is that it encourages you to draw your attention to the motive, intention and awareness. So with that kind of permission and that space, if you create a space between yourself and the situation, that gives you permission to make a choice. And that could go either way. But at the end of the day, it's a choice that you're happy with and that you're consciously making, not making out of an impulse or reacting to the situation.
Yeah, I mean, there's there's so much great there to kind of like pick through and summarize. And it's, you know, what you mentioned earlier, Shannon, about this whole idea of like emotions and talking about feelings and how there's much more wrapped up within a person than just the energy in, energy out. And you've got social situations and all these other reasons of why people eat. And I think if you're listening to this as a coach or even as a client, it's respecting that idea of what you said there, Gabby, of people eat out of like stress or because they're sad, and finding another route out of that for one is really good. Mindfulness actually being one of them. But something that I talk to with clients personally is this idea of doing activities that they did as a kid that they no longer do. Because, you know, as we grow up as adults, we just get into this life of, right, we work, we train, we eat, we sleep, and there's nothing else in people's lives. And actually, if people can rediscover things like drawing or singing or dancing or playing sport for the fun of it, these things can often play quite well parallel. But then what you guys said there about this idea of you always have the choice for one, and if you tie it back to your values of being the person that you want to be in that situation, it's removing that finite mindset again of, oh, I can't have that bit of brownie because I'm trying to lose weight in this moment, and just thinking, well, actually, I'm facilitating a better relationship with food. I am trying to lose a little bit of weight at the moment, but I know that that is a journey that will take time. And so in this moment, I want to have the brownie. And as you then said, Gabby, if you employ that idea of mindfulness, which in the world of 2020, we are all really shit at, at least you can then pause, stop, have that moment with your partner and really enjoy it, and then stop when you're satisfied. But it's as you said, Gabby, people are so scared of, one, stopping when they're satisfied because they're like, oh, I don't even know what that means. And two, that idea of giving themselves permission to eat it because it's just not what is talked about as the norm. And if they've had histories of back, you know, yo-yo dieting and all of those things, they're just not going to feel in a comfortable place to do so.
Yeah, and another thing about mindfulness is that you're observing the situation with curiosity. You're approaching the situation with curiosity. And in the example that we've been using about eating the brownie that your partner gave you, you could approach that, like I say, with your values in mind. And if you did eat it, and then upon reflection, you're unhappy with your whatever, you've got the space then to think, okay, well, in that moment, I made that choice. And thinking about it now, that's probably not what I want to do long term. So now I'm going to have a conversation with my partner about how I really appreciate their kind gestures, but at this moment, this is something that's important to me, and perhaps we could cook a nice meal together instead. And that's something that's more conducive to the results you want to achieve, but you're not feeling bad about what happened. You're pausing to reflect and just be curious about the outcome. And you think, okay, that was an experiment. That's not what I want, but I'm learning from this. And that's the thing as well. It's a learning curve. It's not always about doing the optimal thing, like every minute of the day. It's like, okay, I'm just going to see what my options are, reflect upon them. How did that make me feel? What do I want? And then learning from that, piecing the puzzle together that way and finding an approach that kind of works. And I think that's really the key to like having a sustainable approach, and not going up and down, back and forth, and, you know, feeling bad about things. It's just approaching things with curiosity, and then having a coach to guide you, being like, here's the information that you're seeking, you can make an informed choice, and here's the skills to be able to do that with intention and awareness.
Yes. And I love that you brought up, you know, I'm going to eat this brownie, I'm going to live by my values, because I think that that gets to another difficult sticking point with folks is that they don't view themselves as a person who eats mindfully. They don't identify as a person with those capabilities. And because, and there's so much, I think, rhetoric in the industry about how humans can't do that. And like, this just is impossible. And so people internalize that and think, well, I can't control myself around food. I can't eat mindfully. I can't self-regulate. And because they are so afraid, they never give themselves the opportunity to practice. And it does take practice, but that's how we build that self-efficacy, is that we have the day where we're like, oh, I for example, I had a client who said, I have a package. In the past, I would have eaten the whole thing of cookies, and those experiences, like that thing, or just, oh, I ate part of a meal and I just left the rest on my plate because I was satisfied. We have to give ourselves the opportunity to build that trust with ourselves, to show time and again, hey, I can do this. I actually can stop when satisfied. I actually can eat mindfully. It's not going to be all the time, but then a lot of the time, I am a person who self-regulates. A lot of the time, I am a person who really enjoys my food. And I can tell you from personal experience, there was a time when I couldn't have peanut butter in my house because I was too afraid. I thought if I have peanut butter around, I'm going to eat all of it. And I would get a jar of peanut butter and I would freeze it so that it would be a pain in the butt for me to, take it out and eat any of it. And then, for example, today we went out and I got like 2 pieces of cake and I brought them back to the Airbnb and I had a couple bites of each one. And without distractions, I went and, I went away from the computer and whatnot and ate them. And after a couple bites, I was like, these were not as good as I expected them to be. I don't need to eat anymore. It wasn't like,
I'm glad you said that, because one message within intuitive eating that a lot of people fail to mention is, one of the teachings is, if you don't love it, don't eat it. That's something they talk about. It's actually enjoying the foods that you're eating. And something that you had into them actually don't taste as good as what they thought. It's just the thought of it and knowing that you can't have something that makes you want it.
Yeah. And it's a restrictive mindset.
Go ahead and eat everything. If you don't love it, don't eat it. And again, talking about the values and the choices that you're making, if someone truly values their health, then they are going to engage in healthful behaviors, which isn't going to be overeating. It's going to be eating with enjoyment in moderation. But getting to that stage, like it's a stage that we get to. I think that something that's really important is client themselves. They will make the choices that lead them towards their goals. Not that you are making these food choices or overeating all of the time,
And eating, people have like, sometimes people will eat past the point of fullness. That's just a normal part of eating. Just like sometimes, you'll eat a little bit less because of like,
it's like you're busy.
You're busy. And then, it's like, oh, one day you're just like, oh, why am I starving right now? Oh, I've just been distracted and working, So and I think that's the other issue, is that we think like, I do it perfectly.
Learn to do. You may overeat, you may undereat, and then you reflect, and then you adjust, and that's how you develop that awareness.
I definitely. It's as you said, Gabby, earlier, this idea of you're not going to get it right away. It's like riding a bike or picking up any skill. It's going to take not only practice but deliberate practice. That idea of mindfulness is great, how it ties in so well with it. The idea of actually stepping back and just being really present with what you're doing, not eating in front of the laptop, not eating in front of the TV, and saying both those things to people right now. They'll be like, what? Like, that's just what we do. That's how we live our life. And giving people the permission to stop eating if they don't enjoy it or if they're satisfied. It's something that scares people. But it's, as you said, Shannon, that restrictive mindset of if people have banned things in the
Yeah.
past, they're gonna have that bit of chocolate, and even if they don't enjoy it, they're gonna be like, well, you know, I've had it now, so I might as well finish it. And then that's also what can kick off sabotage mode of having everything else that they deem as bad or not good for them in that moment.
Oh yes. Or the thought that they are never going to be able to eat this food again, you know. And this is a conversation I just had with a client recently, that really I thought provided even more insight into this phenomenon of the abstinence violation effect. So sort of the classic abstinence violation effect is that we make a rule, a diet rule, we break that rule, we experience guilt, shame, and anxiety. It reduces our self-efficacy, and so we're more likely then to, you know, we reform the rule and we break it again. But as we were having this conversation, there's another layer to that, in that when we make that rule, we are making a pact with ourselves. We're making an agreement with ourselves. And we break that rule. It's not just about breaking the rule and eating a food that was off limits. It's that we have sort of, in our minds, let ourselves down. We've broken that trust with ourselves. And so over and that leads to and so to bridge in rebuilding that trust with ourselves as well. And so if we've done that for 10 years of cyclical dieting, now all of a sudden we're asked to trust ourselves around food. I think it's understandably extremely frightening. And you know, I think that even if a coach hasn't been in that situation, and I can say that I have been in that situation, so I can definitely empathize. But even if you haven't been in that situation, I think the best thing you can do is empathize, just because empathy isn't situation specific. It's just emotion specific. But you can empathize fear and anxiety and lack of trust. If you've ever been in a relationship, have to rebuild that trust. That's the situation that you're dealing with there. It's just that person's doing that within themselves.
Yeah, and it's with food as opposed to with another human being that can play back with them.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's a journey, and it's going to be scary for people. And I think it's just, as we talked about earlier, the lack of understanding at the moment is what makes it scary. And it's also the idea of like emotions and feelings and like all of that. It feels like very woo woo. And so you can definitely tell people from like the science heads are like, you know, no, like people feel things. Like what? Like I'm a robot. And it can then be hard to make that, you know, adjustment, I guess. I mean,
yeah. And I'm glad that you mentioned that as well, because like from my perspective, it is that I've kind of come around is by asking questions. Okay, so this is something that people do struggle with. Why is that? Like, what's going on in your head? How are you feeling? Like talking to people, getting different perspectives, because it's very easy to see the world the way that you see things and expect that everyone else is viewing the same thing and, you know, thinking the same way that you do. But that's not the case. Yeah. So if you're curious, and knowing that, you know, different people experience different things and they think differently and they react differently to different situations, if you can get someone to talk about how they're feeling and what they're thinking, that's going to provide you with insight into what's going on, because it's not something that you see yourself, you know. And I think people are stuck in a box of applying things that work for them and forgetting to ask about the person that they're working with, especially if it's something that you haven't dealt with. But by being curious and seeing what people struggle with, that's how I came across like intuitive eating, motivational interviewing, all of these different approaches, because it's like, okay, so the skill set that I'm currently equipped with, what I would usually do, isn't going to work with this person. So what does work with these people? And that's how you know, broaden the skill set and come across different approaches that you can use, and not just based on the way that you view things or the way that things work for you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's branching out of your comfort zone, both in your, you know, if you're listening to this as a coach or even as a client. Like if you feel like you're stuck in that endless cycle of yo-yo dieting or restriction, and you kind of wish that there was a better way, and you don't want to be afraid of food anymore and drop that kind of stigma, then this is definitely a framework to explore. Yeah. And I guess what might have been a faux pas of us to wait until, you know, 75 minutes into the episode to actually clarify intuitive eating in terms of definition and frameworks. So I guess that could be almost where we finish. And I'm not gonna edit the podcast back around because I think it's been a fantastic discussion. And I guess people, as you said, if they want the best definitions, they can go and read the book, and there's the 10 points online. But I guess it's just having that idea of a definition or a framework.
Yeah. So, do you want to start?
Well, we can start by defining what it's not.
Yeah.
It's not an approach to eating that has any, further intentions of like modifying your weight or using it for performance. It's a self-care framework that's not just about eating. It's about your relationship with food and yourself. Mindfulness is a skill set within intuitive eating, and as I say, it's not even just about eating either. It's about respecting your body. There are 10 principles, and you want to run through those?
Yeah. So intuitive eating kind of starts out by emphasizing that it's not, as Shannon said, it is a self-care framework. And so it's focused on 10 principles. Now, they don't have to go in any specific order, but they kind of follow an order that's intuitive, for lack of a better word. But it really starts with sort of, if a person has reached kind of diet rock bottom, which is what we've been talking about here, where they are really terrified of starting another diet, but nothing has worked, and they are they're feeling an inability to accept themselves. That really first, it's time to sort of ditch the diet mentality. The diet mentality being that there is another diet out there that's going to get you to a body size that you'll be able to accept. And that your body is acceptable when everyone else accepted it. Just to say that many of the ways in which an energy deficit might manifest can be physical health. From there, we move through things like honoring hunger and full nutrition. So when we start to get into the idea aligned with health outcomes, and then joyful movement. So that's moving. So there's a sort of a correlational. There's sort of I wouldn't want to say correlation, an associated concept of counternic compulsive exercise that people with exercise dependence were engaging in. And in case people are not familiar, exercise dependence is actually concurrent quite often with disordered eating. And it's when we engage in exercise as a dependency, as a compulsion, rather than something that we are, making a choice to do so from a healthful perspective. And so joyful movement is part of it. And so, moving through those principles in order to increase your self-acceptance and your positive self-regard and self-image, exactly. Increase your self-trust, improve your relationship with food. And sometimes people think that sounds really silly, like, oh, it's food, how do we have a relationship with it? Well, think of it this way. The way that you behave with food is a manifestation of your relationship with yourself. So it's really about improving your relationship with yourself so that you can use food as fuel and enjoyment and meet your other needs with other things that are not food. And then you will be better. It's really, I think, about creating an internal framework that allows you to respond, not just a food environment, but challenging in every way. And then mindfulness as the subset, is sort of a skill subset, is a way that, as Shannon mentioned, you can eat with intention. So you make a decision about how you want that meal to make you feel afterwards, which is usually we want it to make us feel better. And you eat with awareness of both your enjoyment of the food and your hunger and satiety signals. And weight is just something that may change and it may not, but that's not the focus of it. Because when you're trying to improve your relationship with your food and accept yourself, doing that at the same time as trying to change your body intentionally is a little bit like trying to cycle into bike wheels in opposite directions.
Yeah. Ride 2 horses with one arm.
Yeah. I like that a lot. Yeah.
You can't ride 2 horses with one arm.
Yes.
And what's kind of shocking to me is that none of those are conscious. Don't we all want people to make conscious, intentional decisions? That's really kind of the crux of it, because you can look at a behavior, like someone can sit down with a meal like chicken breast, broccoli and rice, and someone can sit down and really enjoy that meal because it's something that they know is going to provide them with nutrition, to go allow them to have the energy to go out and do all the other things that they want to achieve with their life. Or someone can be sitting down to that meal from a place of fear and restriction, eating it because they have to, it's what's on the plan, and they're trying to lose weight. The behaviors are the same, but the intentions and the motivations and the thoughts, so it's not about saying what's wrong or right, like what outcomes or behaviors are wrong or right. It's more about the intentions behind those behaviors.
Yeah, and the regulation. So external. So that's the other big thing that is emphasized in both mind eating and intuitive eating that we do. So instead of I hope it didn't. Okay, there we go. We're back. I froze for a second. So instead of feeling resigned to eat a food, so there are all these other external rather than resignation or an obligation.
So I think, a good coach will be able to provide all of that to the client, not just like this huge focus on being the most scientific and we're going to provide you with all of the next level knowledge. Like, that's a part of it, but also like we're talking about a client evolution. So getting someone from an uninformed place and an out of control place into a position where they can make informed, like they need to be adaptive and flexible, which, as we say, is why we need to be aware of all these different approaches and incorporate the principles of them in our coaching practices.
Yeah. And for the person, it's as you said as well, it's understanding for them that they just may be in a different stage of their life. So some people will be listening to this and be like, doesn't apply to me. And it's like, well, that's fine. You can go ahead and work with a coach and be completely intentional with body composition change or whatever the hell you want to do. But specifically for people who are stuck because they're confused about nutrition and they're in this endless cycle of restriction and good versus bad and all of that, which is increasingly becoming the norm. I think it's definitely more that's more where the population is heading.
I think
to kind of look at first.
One final thing that we'd like to add to that is by saying something like intuitive eating is an approach worth considering for particular people at a given moment in time. You can't infer from that statement anything like macro tracking is bad. Right? No, we didn't say that at all. That's an illogical step. That's an unfounded conclusion. Saying that intuitive eating may be appropriate for specific people at a given time. Nothing more than saying that we need to consider the person and the present moment, what they really need, prioritizing needs.
I think one, when people are responding, they usually are saying, oh, so you're saying that X, Y, and Z.
It's just bad to lose weight.
I would say just flip that. And instead of telling someone what they're saying, ask them, so are you saying X, Y, and Z? Like, oh, so you're saying that macros are bad. No. But you could ask me, so are you saying macros are bad? And I would say, no, macros can be really effective. That's such an efficient way of modifying your dietary intake, Yes, exactly. So it's just that, but it's that black and white thinking that, if you say intuitive eating is is applicable, then you must think that nothing else is ever applicable.
Yeah, it's a great point. We mentioned that earlier, and I know that you Gabby were recently on Iron Culture, and when they had Danny Lennon on to discuss chrononutrition, they were like, I hate it when people say, so you're saying is this, and it's like, no, I'm not saying that, because if I was saying that, I would have said it.
That's what I would be saying.
It's just saying, like, look, we're coming from a place where we're literally telling you that this is a framework where you can avoid the good versus bad and avoid the dichotomous thinking and get away from this idea of black versus white, and then you've just hit me with a black and white statement. Just check yourself, and then let's revisit this. And it's just backwards. But again, it's because we're in this world, aren't we, where people want they want specific answers because they're easier to understand and they're easier to implement. It would be easy for us all to say, okay, the very one thing that you need to do with, reaching your goal is this. But unfortunately, because of the complexity of human nature, emotion, personality, backdrop, and everything else in between, that is a very large spectrum that we need to work within, as opposed to like that.
Yes. And I have gotten really, I think, and I expected this too. So there's a great speaker, Brene Brown. She talks about shame, and she's like a shame researcher, and she talks about vulnerability, and she has this great TED Talk, a few TED Talks, and a Netflix documentary. But she talks about the first time one of her TED Talks went viral, that she was just shit on in the comments. I mean, people said like the worst things. Right. And she has this Teddy Roosevelt quote about, it's not like the man in the crowd that matters. Like, it's not the people who are just watching you from a distance. Their opinions really don't matter. It's the people who are down in the trenches with you, who are down, next to you in battle. Like, those are the opinions that matter. And so I found that, quite a few people are complaining about some of my explanations about intuitive eating and mindful eating and some of the things that I say, because it's so complex and nuanced, and it's a little gray area. And I don't give a black and white, a straight answer to what is intended to be a straight answer question, like, well, can a person X, Y, and Z? Well, I mean, that depends. We have so many things we have to consider, but I'm like, I expected that, and I really don't mind, because I'm like, well, I'm not going to take that personally. I'm not going to absorb that feedback, because I know that what we're talking about is a nuanced topic, and that if a person is not going to take the time to really sit down and consider the points, then they probably are just going to write it off anyway. And that's okay. There are going to be people who are just like, this isn't going to work, and I don't care what you say. And so really, it doesn't matter what I say, Exactly. So, but, it's just great to have these conversations where we do have coaches that want to learn more and that want to get into the gray area and have these conversations and know that it's person specific. And the more we can do this, it hopefully will have a ripple effect, and we'll be doing that instead of playing a shitty game of telephone where people are just passing around what they think intuitive eating is.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It's hey, here's hoping, but it'll be interesting to see if the fitness industry adopts this this idea of playing along. I don't see it happening anytime soon. Anyway, cool. Well, I think that's it's been a great discussion. I've definitely enjoyed it. I hope the listeners have enjoyed it. I was nearly saying readers there. I'll put your contact details all in the show notes, because I'll upload this as a blog. So all there's left to say really is if you guys have any final points that you want to get across right now, then you can do so.
I think just one final thing is that this whole kind of discussion or debate or whatever is kind of highlighting the point, like, it shouldn't be so controversial. That's what's most interesting to me, that the idea that someone probably maybe it's not the best idea for someone to prioritize a body composition or a performance goal. Like, why is that so controversial? Because that's what the conversation always comes back to. But is this going to, can athletes use this approach? Is this optimal for this? Like, why is that the only thing that someone might need? Like, I think that's really important. And, like the discussion about emotions and things like that, like, why is that so controversial for someone?
Yeah.
Why is that so far removed from, you know, why are we so defensive about it? Why has this got our backs up? I think that's something that's worth addressing. And I do think, you know, like weight stigma and things like that are quite a big issue that we are seeing a lot of. So just to reiterate that, you know, what does someone actually need? And I think first, do no harm is really the important thing that we should keep in mind. And I'd say that these behaviors are often covert, and I would rather err on the side of caution rather than, you know, being super precise with my statements, like, you know, macro tracking isn't disordered for some people. Like, yeah, we know that, but is that really a helpful message?
Right.
You know, what's the most helpful message here?
No. Okay.
Go.
Do you want me to start, or Gabby? I can't.
You were literally just finishing as we cut across, and
Okay,
I'll try and piece this together as best as
Okay. I think the other thing we need to emphasize is informed consent,
Yeah.
and ensuring that our clients have the ability to provide informed consent. So we have to be very transparent about the pros and cons and risks and benefits of any approach. It also needs to be a decisions. We need to empower them with quality coach.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. And I would say a conscientious coach.
Yes.
Hey, I like that. I like it. Yeah, it's great. I think it's there's a lot of gems there for both people listening who are and aren't coaches. It's a case of understanding as you said earlier, Shannon, you know, you're not asking that dichotomous the question of like, is this right for an athlete or is this right for this person? It's just a case of using the right tool at the right time for the right person in the right situation to give the right result. And as a coach working with a person, you need to have the emotional intelligence to understand that you might need to have a difficult conversation because that person might not be ready for what they think they want.
Yeah, exactly.
Cool.
Awesome.
Nice one. Right. Well, before we all turn into robots again, I'd like to say thank you again for both being on. It's been an honor to speak to you both about it. I wish you all the best with the rest of the article series as well, which I'm going to put, as I said, this episode into a blog. So I'll put those links in there alongside all your other links. So anything else that you guys feel would be useful, just fire them across. And yeah, thanks for being on.
Great.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.